Now before I put the featherboard on, I want to put a vapour barrier between the framing and where the featherboard will be. So I'm using a product, I've got the leaflet for it here. It's called Ondutiss Air, and it's made by the Angeline people, and basically it's a vapour barrier, it's waterproof, and it's the sort of thing you would put between something like the frame of the shed and the outer cladding, and it allows any moisture that might get trapped in between to escape. And I'm going to use the same on the roof. I've cut my first piece, and it's very easy to identify which is the inside and which is the outside, because it's got all the writing on the outside. And it's really conveniently marked off with squares which are 10 and 20 centimetres across. So it's really, really easy to organise. And the way one does it is to make sure that it's stapled to the frame, and there's sufficient overlap between sections of the Ondutiss such that it does a proper job. And I'm going to make sure that on the inside you would not see a join, so I'm going to start, say, here, like so, and run a line of staples down here, and then bring this round the corner, and my next piece which will go on will overlap and be stapled here and go on that way, and that way I'll have the proper coverage. And I'm going to have to start by removing these corner pieces that I fitted. You remember those were fitted a little while ago. So I'm just going to take these out. And it's important that the right pieces go back in the right places because of the screw holes. So I've started at the top and I'm working my way down, doing it neatly in line with this upright here. You can use either staples or large flat-headed nails, flat-headed, large-headed, flat-headed, large flat-headed nails. Nails with large flat heads. Now I really do want to make sure that this is wrinkle free, so on the inside it looks nice and tidy. And so I'm going to take a bit of care now to draw it tight across this corner and then tight down there. You can see it's really easy to fix, particularly with a stapler. I have got an air stapler, but it's a little bit aggressive. Sometimes it goes through material like this. Well, amazingly, we managed to get all of the Ondutiss on here before the rain came, and it was literally within minutes before the rain came. It's on all four walls and on the sarked roof as well. I've even put one of the vertical pieces back on the end, and I had a quick test go and I put one of the bits of featherboard at the bottom. Now with Ondutiss, what they recommend, and I don't have any, is that at joints between bits of Ondutiss like this, you should use some special tape. I don't have any, but I'm not really worried about that because I've got a pretty healthy overlap here, and it is just a shed. And the same goes here. I've got an overlap which is probably about 40 centimetres or more. And you can see now my boards are coming up against there, closing that up. And the same just here as well. So that's going to be perfectly okay. Now I've fixed it using staples, and the staples are roughly 20 centimetre centres. Now we had a lot of rain last night, and you can probably still see some of the drip drops sitting here. on top of the Ondutiss, but underneath it's as dry as a bone, and I've checked inside, absolutely perfect. So I'm really, really pleased with this. It does the job. Well, it's time to start putting on all of the Featherboard now, which is really exciting. I've got my nail gun all set up, all ready to go. I'm just going to put a pencil line which marks the centres of my various bits of wood that I'm fixing into. It's really important because I want my nails to all be in a straight line, and also I don't want any of them to miss the piece of wood. And through the Ondutiss, I can just feel the edge. With this finger, I can feel the edge of the piece of wood behind. And then I put that yellow line down there. Next one is here. And this actually, although it seems to be a bit of a time-consuming thing to do, it really is a good idea. Again, we had a little bit more rain last night, and this is all dry as a bone now. I don't know what time the rain stopped, in the middle of the night somewhere. This is absolutely dry as anything. So it's good stuff. Before I actually start, I want to show you this little gadget which I've made. Now, this is a gadget which will help me to get the spacing between my boards as they go on at exactly 110 millimeters. And this is how it works. This edge here is designed to go up under the previously laid board. Now, I haven't got one that I can really demonstrate at the moment because I'm right at the bottom. So the previous laid board, its bottom goes there. The next board to be laid has its bottom sitting on there, which means I can have this set up at one end and I can be at the other end getting the board in the right place and nailing it. So it gives me like a third hand. Now, the important dimensions are the distance from here to the top there. So the top of this to the top of that is 110 millimeters. And the same here and here, which means I can do it at any corner. And so were I able to get this first one underneath the edge of the previous board, it would go something like that. Underneath the edge of the previous board, the next board would then sit on there. I can go to the other end and then start nailing. And it works at any corner because it can be rotated. Always this way up. So here I've got my gadget at this end, and I've held it on with a clamp, and the distance between the bottom of this board and that edge there is 110. And at the other end here, I've stuck my bradawl in so that I've got a free hand to put a nail in. Right, so you can see I'm set up now. That end's supported at the right height, this end's supported at the right height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this up tight. I'm going to put a nail in just here. Now, safety features, eye protection, ear protection, and make sure you understand all of the instructions for handling a nail gun like this. And there goes that first nail in. Means I can now remove my bradawl and continue with the other nails. So that end is nice and secure. I'll put one in at this end. And now I can remove my clamping arrangement. Just there. That's the first one. I now continue exactly the same. Now, like all good designs, when you take it from the drawing board and make a prototype and then try it, it's not always going to work first time. So here we go. I've added a little piece here, a piece there, and this is a piece which is a variable thickness, so it's just a piece of the wedgy stuff that can be used as and when required. So that's now in place as it should be, and that is nice and firm. So I can now start the next one. in order to transfer the level across here, what I'm doing is I'm using this long spirit level, eyeballing where it should be, putting my bradawl in just a little bit there, and that now represents the bottom for this corner. I then use my little spirit level here, that's fine, and I can now put that in. And I just continue doing that all the way up. Quite clever really, isn't it? Now you may recall from an earlier video about the shed build that I had these little noggins at the end of the various roof trusses, and my idea was that these would provide an extra bit of fixing for the fascia. One, I don't need that extra fixing, and two, getting the very last board up under there is actually very tricky, because these, I made them slightly too big. So anyway, I've removed them, and it was not easy because I glued them as well. Anyway, so what I'm doing now is just taking a board which fits the space, and I've offered it up, and I've marked very carefully where each of the pieces of the roof truss come down and intersect with the frame. And I'm going to cut these out and then try and fit it. Another occasion where I'm using this Japanese saw, which I showed you a while ago, which is proving it's worth its weight in gold. Now, cutting these awkward bits as they go up under the roof there, and with other obstacles in the way, is not trivial, but it's not so difficult that you need to be put off. Let me take you to the other end and I'll show you the one I'm working on now. I've just cut this one to shape, and let me show you how I went about it. Right. Okay. What I did was, on each side, I measured from this edge here up 110 millimeters, and that's the distance that I tried to achieve all the way through between the bottom of one of the boards and the bottom of the next one. So I measured up there 110, and I put a little pencil line on here where that 110 intersects with that point underneath the gable there. And I did exactly the same at this end. You might just be able to see a little pencil mark there. And then I measured very accurately, well, as accurately as I could, between those 2 points. Then I went to the workshop, you could have done it outside, and I cut this piece with those 2 slopes, and this distance from point to point was that distance across there. I then did a test fit by sort of pushing it up into place as far as I could go. Of course, this was in the way, so I had to be out this way a little bit, and it seemed to be about right. And I then measured from that point there to the door, from that point there to the door frame, and then checked that what was left between the two was what was across there, and I then cut this gap here. I knew by measuring from here how much that top of the door frame would intrude into this piece of wood. Now, it just so happens that I cut this just a very slight amount too wide on this side, but I'm not really worried about that. It is a shed, remember. And so that pushes in there reasonably well. And I'm doing the same for the next board. I'm going to measure from the bottom here up to 110, and I've actually got a little pencil line on there already. And ditto on this side, and there's a little pencil line there. And this is the piece of wood that's going to go up into that space. Now, if I just put it past there, you can probably see that that looks as though it's going to be about the right distance upwards from there. But I now need to mark for these 2 pieces, which really sort of protect my air vent from the side, from the weather. So I'm going to do that next. Right, for this next board, this is now the fiddly bit, because the board's going to go in here, just under here. We've got to make allowance for this. Now I've measured up from the bottom here to the lower edge of these two protrusions. It's exactly 132 millimeters. So I'm going to draw myself a little diagram, always helps. So got those, 132. So I've now transferred the measurements onto here. I measured from my reference point, which has coincided with the reference point I'd already marked on the other piece, to get the places where those two pieces stick out from the end gable. And if you remember, I said that we wanted to have space in the middle here to free up the air vent, but I wanted to have a little bit left behind to cover the bottom edge where that mesh is tacked on. So my cutout is shaded, and I hope you can just about make that out. So I'm now going to cut that out. We'll see if it's right. It might not be. We'll see. Now, in order to do a rebate like this, where I've got a reasonable length to cut, you can use a track saw, and all you have to do is to put your guide rail on as securely as possible. And then what you're going to do is plunge down with the track saw, keeping an eye on where the rear portion of the blade is at this end in reference to the pencil line where you want to stop. And then as you traverse along, keep an eye on the front edge of the blade so that it doesn't cross that other line. In actual fact, in our case, because we're actually cutting out a little bit more beyond, I don't need to be hugely accurate at this stage. So there's that, and I can now use my Japanese pull saw to do the rest. I realise this is probably not easy for you to see because of the contrast of the lights today. Right, I've just got to trim these little bits out with a chisel. Getting something like this right first time is pretty easy, but getting it wrong first time is even easier. So anyway, here's Mark II. I've remarked this. I'm going to do the same process, cutting down there, through there, and it will be perfect. Now this time, in order to do this cut here, because I can't quite get a guide rail on, I've gone down several times here with the saw, used the chisel to create the first little bit of an opening, and from there on in I can now saw. That looks a little bit more like it. Now I'll try it. Right, we'll see if this fits this time. Looking promising. Well, I think that's close enough for government work. Then finishing off the rest is going to be fairly straightforward, just a little triangular piece in there, and a triangular piece at the top, and that will close it all off. I'm glad that's over. Right, I don't know if you see the shape of that. That is shaped so that I can allow the ridge board to go in there, and then this comes down over my little cover for the air vent, and that's the very last piece. And then the whole of the cladding is done. That's it. And now I can get on with the roof.